Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. Today is the second book of the Song of the LIoness Quartet, which is the second book out of Tamora Pierce's Tortall series. And this book is obviously the sequel to Alannah First Adventure, but in this one, that first book covered 1 year. This book covers a couple of years. And the first book was about Alannah's time as a page. That's kind of like the early learning period for On the Path to Knighthood. That's where you get all of your basic lessons, where you first learn the basics of how to use a sword and various other weapons, and all of the education in tactics and history and what all that you need to be a knight. The second stage, being a squire, is basically like an apprenticeship period. So you're, give or take 14 years old-ish. And the thing about being a squire is that's where you start getting a lot more practical work, and basically being your knight master's assistant, because you sort of get taken on by a knight who is supposed to effectively mentor you. Like I said, it's very much an apprenticeship period where you get to watch your knight master do stuff and learn how to be a knight. And Alannah, at the end of the last book, her secret of being a girl is given away to Prince Jonathan. And the thing was that in the first book, she got folded into Prince Jonathan's little collective of friends. Because Jonathan wound up with sort of this small group of cronies who were his particular friends, who he could rely on and particularly trust. It's actually an interesting contrast with a later book in the series that I will not be rereading for personal... I have things that I don't particularly want to discuss about Tamora Pierce's later books, and I'm not going to be reading them, but the later series starring Celadri of Mindolin, which I did read, that series of 4 books has Prince Jonathan's, at that point now, King Jonathan's eldest son, Roald, who does not have any particular friends, and it actually provides a very interesting contrast between the two books, because Jonathan having a particular set of cronies is something that came back to him years later as a problem, one would assume, in that politically people would keep on saying, oh, you're always giving your close friends all of these spots, because, of course, his close trusted friends are the people that he knows and can rely upon to follow the various ideas and progressive notions that he wants to espouse during his period as king. But it's clear that the advice that he gave to Roald was to not have any particular friends, specifically so that many, many years later, when Roald becomes king upon his father's death, that Roald will not have this issue of everybody saying, you've put all of your dearest friends into these important spots. I frankly suspect that the reason why Jonathan had a bunch of close friends was because his father, King Roald, because he named his son after his father, probably, I would guess, told Jonathan, you should have a close circle of friends so that you have the people you can rely on, who you know are your friends and you know are reliable and you know you can trust them to be there for you and be the things that you need your friends to be. oddly enough, both things are very, very good advice for a king, because on the one hand, if you're a king, you know that everybody is going to want to take advantage of you and curry favor with you. So having people who you know and can be sure of is a valuable thing. On the other hand, it is equally valuable from a political perspective to not have everybody constantly accuse you of playing favorites, rather than doing what Jonathan is probably doing, which is saying, I know that this person is competent for the job, so I'm putting this person in. So it does contrast interestingly, but that's enough about Kelladry of Mindellan and everything else going on there. I'll probably come back to that at some point. But anyways, so in this, Alannah is wound up being the prince's squire. And it's because she was arguably the best of the pages of her year graduating to being a squire. She's the best with a sword, and she's smart and has a whole bunch of other sterling qualities. And so Alannah's first year had to do almost as much with her proving to herself that she could get through everything, that she could do this, that she could be this, and that she was as good as the boys. When we start this book, that's no longer her concern. The end of the first book has a wonderfully freeing moment where, when Jonathan asks her, who do you think I should take for my squire? In the second last chapter, she had been thinking, no, he shouldn't take me. He should take any number of other people who would be good for this. And at the end of the last chapter, he asks her and she says, you should take me, because she has hit that stride and that confidence. And it's one thing that I think in a way is very much appreciated in these books, however unrealistic it might be considered on one level or another. Alannah never doubts her general capabilities ever again. She might doubt a specific capability that she has in some specific circumstance, but as a matter of general self-worth, as a matter of being as good as the boys, as any of that stuff, she absolutely leaves that behind and has a very, very solid self-confidence in herself as a competent adult human being. And it carries through everything in this book. She isn't happy about being good at sorcery, but she has let go of the fact that she's not happy about it and accepts that she has the gift, and it's a powerful gift, and she can use it. At the start of this book, though, is a very, very significant scene, because this is the scene. This book is called In the Hand of the Goddess, and the very first chapter immediately explains where this is, and immediately explains that where this title comes from. Because in the first chapter of this book, the Great Mother Goddess visits Alannah in person. The previous book, there were various interactions with the Mother Goddess through invoking her through various sorceries. There is Miles's comment in the previous book about how when the gods interfere in the lives of us poor mortals, we just have to do whatever it is they're asking and hope that they'll go away again as quickly as possible. But in this book, this isn't calling on her through some sort of spell. This is a actual physical human being shaped person walks up to Alannah, sits down at her fire, and has a conversation, and then hands Alannah a magical token. That is, she reaches into the fire and pulls out a glowing ember and tells Alannah, "Take it from my hand." And when Alannah does, it is coated in some sort of clear crystal. And it turns out that this is a magical token that when she is holding it, she can see active magics, and see traces of previous magics. And throughout this book, Alannah is constantly at odds with Duke Roger of Conte. That is, the king's brother, and Prince Jonathan's uncle. And in the first book, he was noised around as the only person who could have caused an illness that nearly killed the prince. And throughout this book, we see these constant pieces of evidence that he is casting spells, that he is affecting things, that he's trying to kill Alannah for reasons that Alannah repeatedly seems unsure of and confused about and doesn't understand why she's important enough for it. And at the end of the book, she goes through the ordeal of knighthood, and the ordeal of knighthood is a room that you walk into, and you're locked in there, and based on this and the protector of the small tetralogy, it makes you face your fears. It puts you in this room and says, if you're scared of spiders, as Alannah is, it will make a giant spider, walk up to you and harass you. But at the end of it, Alannah is faced with some sort of a gauze that keeps her from seeing what's on the other side, and she tears it open and sees a vision of Duke Roger basically forcing his way onto the throne. Because if Prince Jonathan dies, then Roger is the next in line for the throne after the king and queen. So throughout this book, there is the minor war over the Drell Valley with Toussaint, in which he arranges for Alannah to be kidnapped, in which he arranges to try to get Jonathan killed. There are repeated attempts in various survival and other efforts and travels that Alannah goes on, in which, again, attempts are made on her life. And in the end, she faces off with him in a final duel, pictured here on the cover, and she kills him. It's a trial by combat, which is, of course, always highly problematic, except in universes where there are actual gods who would probably actually interfere if things were, not good. But she faces off with him and kills him, and at the end of the book decides, and now I'm going off to have adventures, which was something she had been planning to do the whole time, because she spent all of this time being worried about being a girl and becoming a knight, and the worry about the aftermath of that. The other major thing going on in this book is a lot of talk about romance and sex. Now, it's not that there's any really explicit sex going on. This is a book aimed at kids. But it's very, very clear about sex being totally fine as long as one is taking appropriate precautions. In this case, this being a place with magic, you can have a magic necklace that prevents pregnancy. And there are two potential romantic partners. She winds up in a relationship with Prince Jonathan, but George Cooper, the thief, who has been in these books right from the start, is also there. And we'll talk more about George in the next one. I'm also running out of time on my timer here. This is probably my favorite out of the tetralogy. I enjoy the story of her building up her skills, of just the adventures going on with it. And I think that's all I have to say before my timer runs down. So That's everything, and I will see you all next week.